Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here to share with you 3 key steps that you're gonna wanna take in order to achieve louder mixes. So as you might know already, just taking a limiter and slamming your mix through it doesn't really work. You end up losing all the transients on your kick and snare drum, the mix sounds distorted, and just usually ends up sounding like crap. So the question is, how do you get your mix nice and loud while still sounding natural and transparent? Luckily, I have 3 very simple, actionable steps that you can use in your mixes right now in order to achieve better, louder mixes. Step number 1, high pass your drum bus. Yes, this means you're even high passing your kick drum. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but there's a ton of information on your kick drum that you just don't need. In my opinion, anything below 40 Hertz is just junk frequency that's gonna end up eating a lot of headroom on your master fader that's just not necessary. And the thing that's really tricky about this range is you don't even really hear it. And to be honest, you barely even feel it. It's just a ton of wasted energy that you don't need. So I have a mix pulled up. Here's my drum bus. And let's look at my EQ. As you could tell, everything below 40 Hertz is rolled off. And just to demonstrate for you how little you perceive this roll off, I'm gonna play the mix back and I'm gonna intermittently bypass this high pass filter just so you can see how little of an effect it has on your perception of the low end of the kick. Let's check it out. So as you could probably tell when I bypassed the high pass filter, you don't even notice it. This is a good thing. This means I'm getting rid of everything below 40 Hertz that's just not necessary. Now you gotta remember, the lower the frequency, the more energy it's gonna take up within your mix. It's frequencies like these that really get you into trouble when it comes to limiting if you're not addressing them within the mix. Now the reason why I'm doing this on my drum bus and not on my individual kick channel is that none of the other drums actually live this low anyway, so it's just much simpler to apply this filter on my drum bus. So try applying this on your drum bus within one of your own mixes and watch just how much extra headroom you have on your master bus. So on the topic of drums, this brings us to step number 2, clip your drum bus. So what does clipping your drum bus exactly entail? Pretty much what you're doing is you're lopping off transient, but in a way that it's not hurting your drums. Why would you want to lop off transient? Again, it'll allow you to have extra headroom within your mix. The more headroom you have in your mix, the louder you could bring up the overall level without having to have any gain reduction taking place on your master fader. So remember, we're doing this within the mix. We're not even touching our master fader yet. All we're tweaking right here is our drum bus. You can use a few different tools for clipping your drum bus. You could use a tape saturator, you could use a clipper, and in this case, I'm just using a simple brick wall limiter. And I'm using the L1 limiter. This has existed since the dawn of time. So I'm gonna play the track back and I'm gonna intermittently bypass the plugin so you can hear the effect that it has on the drums. Let's check it out. So as you can tell, it's not majorly affecting my drum sound. It's just controlling the transient on my snare drum a little. So I'm gonna play it back again and I want you to pay attention to how much gain reduction is happening in the gain reduction meter within my limiter. So as you can tell, about 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction is taking place within the limiter, which is nothing extreme. But the magic here is how much this is actually controlling the overall level of my drums, not the perceived level of my drums. So in other words, it's keeping my drums sounding nice and loud without them actually being loud. This is super important when it comes to making your mix louder because again, it allows you to have extra headroom within your mix. So just to demonstrate this point further, I want you to pay attention to my drum level within my drums submix. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bypass the limiter intermittently and I want you to see how much of an effect that has on my actual level within the drum submix. You're gonna notice that when the limiter is engaged, it really puts a tight lid on my drum mix, but it doesn't really affect the sound too much. So I'm gonna play the track back, pay close attention to the actual level within my drum mix. Check this out. as you can tell, when I bypassed the limiter, the peak level was much higher. But what's interesting is even though the peak level was much higher, it didn't sound a ton louder. So again, what this means is we're keeping our drums nice, punchy, and loud without them actually being loud. And what we could do then is take our overall mix level, and since it's more in control, we could bring it up at the mastering phase and it'll have a much more transparent effect. It's much more powerful to do this within your mix than to try and accomplish all of this in the mastering phase. You'll end up with way cleaner and more natural sounding results. So if you've never tried this within one of your mixes, just try taking a limiter or a clipper or some form of tape saturator and just knock off a few dB on your drum bus. The key is to not overdo it. If you overdo it, you will hear it and you don't want that. That's when you end up getting into trouble with really soft transients and just mushy sounding drums. I'm just taking off 3 to 4 dB. But that 3 to 4 dB on your drum submix makes a huge difference when it comes to making your mix louder. The more available headroom we have and the more in control our transients are, the better. And this brings us to step number 3. Use multiple processes on your master bus. In other words, don't try to get a whole lot out of just one plugin. So let's take a look at what I have on my master bus. I have a bus compressor, a tape saturator, and a multi-band limiter, and a regular limiter. So I'm gonna play the track back and I'm gonna point to each of the gain reduction meters within each of these plugins as the mix is playing, and I want you to pay attention to just how much gain reduction is taking place within all of these plugins. And again, these are all stacked on my master fader. Let's check it out. Okay, what's interesting here is each of these processors is doing very little. My regular bus compressor was achieving about 2 dB of gain reduction. The tape saturator was achieving about half a dB. The multiband compressor was achieving roughly 2 to 3 dB. And my limiter was not doing any gain reduction. I'm only using this limiter to bring up the level of my mix, so when I send the mix to the band, it's at a semi-decent commercial level. So again, my mix is so in control that the limiter didn't even have to attenuate any peaks. The reason why I'm bringing this up is people try to achieve this process within one plugin. That's not the way to do it. You can end up with a weird, pumpy, and often distorted sound that way. Now, I don't want you to obsess over the exact tools that I'm using. It's the principle, it's the approach. Subtle bits of gain reduction happening in each process adds up to a much more transparent result. Now, if you combine all 3 of these steps, removing all of that unnecessary low-end energy on your drum bus, clipping your drum bus, and just having little bits of gain reduction in multiple processes on your master bus, you will be able to make your mix much louder without even having to limit your mix. This will make mastering a breeze. And just to demonstrate how easy this can make mastering, I'm gonna show you something. So like I previously mentioned, the limiter that's on my master fader is not doing any limiting at all. I'm just using it to bring up the overall level of my mix. But with that being said, when you have a mix that's in balance as this, mastering is super simple. So what I'm gonna do right now is bypass that limiter, and I'm gonna bring up my favorite limiter for mastering, and that is the Ozone plugin. Now, if we look within the plugin, the only processor that I'm using is the inbuilt limiter. Nothing else. No EQ, no stereo widening, no fancy bells and whistles, just the limiter. Now, because this limiter is meant for mastering, it is gonna be doing a little bit of gain reduction, but very little. It doesn't have to work that hard because our mix is so well in balance. Making this mix loud and at a commercial level so it competes with other pro mixes level-wise is gonna be a non-issue. Now, this is gonna be way louder because now we're at true commercial level. So what I'm gonna do right now is play the track back and let's look at just how much gain reduction is taking place within my mastering limiter. Let's check it out. So I don't know if you noticed the red numbers that were appearing here, but that was the amount of gain reduction taking place within my limiter. I'm gonna play it again and let's look at those numbers carefully. If you notice, we saw numbers like -0.5, -1, -2, -2.5, briefly -3. What that is the amount of gain reduction that's taking place within my limiter. And that is very, very conservative when it comes to limiting. And the only reason why I can get away with this is because I took the time to apply these 3 crucial steps. So remember, when it comes to achieving loud mixes, the name of the game is headroom. And in order to create more headroom, get rid of that unnecessary low end on your drum bus, moderately clip the peaks on your drums, and control the dynamic range on your master fader in a tasteful way by spreading out the work amongst multiple processors on your master fader. So what I want you to do is I want you to apply all 3 of these steps within your next mix. And once you've received the result, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear how much it has helped you. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon in order to be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And be sure to download my free 5-step guide for achieving pro metal mixes with the gear you already have. There is a link below right within this video's description. Till next time, happy mixing and mastering.